72 hours after her husband was found to be shot death, she asked police for a letter, not to help catch his killer, but a letter to speed up her $1 million insurance payout. This is a woman who wrote an essay called How to Murder Your Husband. 7 years later, her husband was shot twice and left to die on a kitchen floor. Police found the essay. Then they found her surveillance footage. Then they found the gun she bought online. She claimed she couldn't remember any of it, but the cameras never forgot. June 2, 2018, 7:30 a.m. Students arrive at the Oregon Culinary Institute in Portland. The doors are locked. Strange. Chef Brophy is always early. One student has a key. She opens the door. She sees him immediately. Face down. Blood everywhere. He's been shot twice, once in the back, once in the chest. The back wound dropped him, paralyzed him. The chest wound came after. Someone stood over him and fired again. Police notify his wife, Nancy Brophy. She's a romance novelist, self-published, not successful, but persistent. Officers tell her what happened. Her husband is dead, murdered at work. Her reaction feels off. Not hysterical, not frantic, almost rehearsed. She says she was home all morning, never left, has no idea who would do this. But 3 days later, she does something strange. She asks police for a letter, a document stating she's not a suspect. She needs it for the insurance companies to speed up the payout. Her husband has been dead for 72 hours. She's already thinking about money. Detectives start digging. What they find changes everything, because Nancy and Daniel weren't just struggling financially. They were drowning. $60,000 in credit card debt, spending $10,000 a month, earning $4,000. The math didn't work. But Daniel had life insurance, multiple policies, over $1.4 million, and Nancy had recently increased his coverage. Now detectives have a motive, but they need more. They start pulling surveillance footage from across Portland, traffic cameras, business security systems, ATMs. What they see makes them call Nancy back in. At 6:30 a.m. on the morning of the murder, a minivan matching Nancy's vehicle is captured driving towards southwest Portland. 7:12 a.m., the same van appears blocks from the culinary school. 7:45 a.m., it's leaving the area. Daniel was killed between 7 and 7:30 a.m. Nancy's van was there during the exact window. Detectives confront her, show her the footage. She changes her story immediately. Maybe she did drive there. She can't remember. Trauma erased her memory. Retrograde amnesia. She genuinely has no recollection of that morning. Detectives find this explanation incredibly convenient. Then they find the essay, written in 2011, published online, titled How to Murder Your Husband. Nancy wrote about motives, financial stress, affairs, boredom. She wrote about methods. Guns were loud but effective, knives too messy, poison too complicated. She even wrote about alibis. Don't be home when it happens. Create distance. And then there's this line. If the murder is supposed to set me free, I certainly don't want to spend any time in jail. Detectives thought they'd seen everything, but a murder suspect who'd literally written a how-to guide? That was new. They get a warrant for Nancy's computer. Her search history tells a story she can't explain away. September 2017, 9 months before the murder. Ghost gun, untraceable firearms, buy guns without background check. October 2017, Glock ghost gun kit. How to assemble ghost gun. Are ghost guns legal, Oregon? November 2017, she buys one, a Glock kit, uses her own credit card, ships it to her home. Daniel was killed with a Glock. When asked about the purchase, Nancy has an explanation ready. Research for a novel. Her protagonist needed an untraceable weapon. She wanted authenticity. She bought the kit, looked at the parts, took notes, then sold it. Where? At a gun show. To who? A stranger. Any proof? None. The gun kit she bought, the gun that killed her husband, both Glocks, both untraceable. Detectives don't believe in coincidences. But there's more. Something Nancy didn't know surveillance cameras had captured. Her van wasn't just at the scene on the morning of the murder. It was there 3 days before, and 2 days before, and the day before. Same time, same route, driving slowly past the culinary school. Not stopping, just watching, like she was rehearsing.
September 6th, 2018, 3 months after the murder, Nancy is arrested. She posts bail, goes home, continues claiming amnesia, continues insisting the ghost gun was for research. The trial is set for 2022, 4 years away. But prosecutors are building something Nancy can't talk her way out of. They have her words, her searches, her movements, her motive. They have everything. April 2022. The trial begins. Nancy sits at the defense table, composed, taking notes, making eye contact with witnesses. She looks confident, like someone who knows she'll walk free. The prosecution's strategy is simple. Show 3 things: motive, means, opportunity. Then watch her story collapse. First witness, the student who found Daniel's body. She describes walking into the school, seeing him on the floor, the blood, the stillness. She breaks down on the stand, can't finish sentences. Nancy watches without emotion. Medical examiners testify next. 2 gunshot wounds, back first, chest second. The back wound paralyzed him, dropped him instantly. The chest wound came after, while he was down, helpless. Someone walked up to him, stood over him, fired again. This wasn't panic. This was execution. Forensic analysts present the shell casings, 9mm Glock pistol. The same type Nancy purchased, but without the actual gun, they can't make a definitive match. Nancy's story about selling it becomes crucial. If she no longer has it, the link breaks. Prosecutors call the gun show manager. No records of Nancy selling anything, no booth rental, no vendor registration, no witnesses. Her sales story has 0 corroboration. Then comes the surveillance footage, played on large screens, timestamps visible. 6:30 a.m., Nancy's van leaves her neighborhood. 6:54 a.m., traffic camera captures it heading toward the school. 7:12 a.m., blocks away from the Oregon Culinary Institute. 7:45 a.m., leaving the area. Daniel was killed between 7 and 7:30 a.m. Nancy claimed amnesia, said she couldn't remember driving there. Defense argues maybe she brought him coffee, maybe she wanted to talk. Being nearby doesn't make her a killer. But prosecutors aren't done. They show footage from days before. May 28th, Nancy's van driving past the school, early morning, moving slowly. May 30th, same thing, same time. June 1st, 1 day before the murder, same route again. A surveillance expert testifies. Nancy took back roads, avoided main intersections, chose paths with fewer cameras. This wasn't random. This was someone trying to minimize their digital footprint, someone planning. Computer forensics takes the stand. They walk through Nancy's search history month by month. September 2017, ghost gun, untraceable firearms. October 2017, Glock ghost gun kit, how to assemble. November 2017, purchase confirmed. January 2018, how long does life insurance pay out? Defense argues she's a writer. Writers research dark things, but prosecutors have an answer ready. They call a literary expert, someone who analyzed Nancy's published novels. None featured ghost guns, none had scenes with firearms assembly, none used untraceable weapons. If she was researching for a book, where's the book? Defense can't produce one. No manuscript, no outline, no notes. The research had no literary purpose, only a practical one. Financial analysts present next: credit card statements, bank records, spending patterns. Nancy and Daniel were spending double their income every month for years. But 2 weeks before the murder, Nancy was shopping online, browsing engagement rings, expensive ones, thousands of dollars. She added several to a cart, never purchased, just browsing, like she was planning for something. An insurance agent testifies. Nancy contacted him 6 months before the murder, asked about increasing Daniel's coverage, wanted to maximize payouts. The agent remembers thinking it was unusual. Most people don't obsess over life insurance details. 3 days after Daniel's death, Nancy contacted the insurance companies again. When would she get paid? Would the police investigation delay things? She needed that letter from police, the one saying she wasn't a suspect. Most grieving spouses think about funerals, arrangements, processing loss. Nancy was thinking about money. Final prosecution witness, a colleague of Daniel's, another chef. He testifies about a conversation months before the murder. Nancy asked about his life insurance, how much coverage, what his wife would receive if something happened. He found it intrusive, but Nancy framed it as casual curiosity. Now he realizes she was gathering information, learning what was normal, what wouldn't raise suspicion. The prosecution rests. They've shown motive, means, opportunity, planning. Everything points to Nancy. But she wants to testify, against her lawyer's advice. She thinks she can explain everything. What happens next will determine if she spends life in prison or walks free.
Day 5 of the trial. Nancy takes the stand. Dark blazer, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back. She looks directly at the jury. Her attorney starts with easy questions: how she met Daniel, their life together, shared passions. Nancy's voice is steady. She calls Daniel her soulmate, her best friend, the love of her life. She tears up, pauses to compose herself. The jury watches closely. Then her attorney asks about the ghost gun. Nancy's explanation is calm, matter of fact. She was writing a novel, a thriller. Her protagonist needed an untraceable weapon. She wanted authenticity. So she researched, bought a kit, looked at the parts, took notes, then realized she didn't need that level of detail. Sold it at a gun show, cash transaction. Can't remember the buyer's name or which gun show. It was months ago. Didn't seem important. She tells this story smoothly, like it's perfectly reasonable. Then comes the surveillance footage, her van at the crime scene during the murder window. Nancy's explanation is retrograde amnesia. The trauma of losing Daniel erased her memory of that morning. She can't recall driving there, can't remember her movements between 6 and 8 a.m. It's a blank space, a psychological survival mechanism. She's consulted experts. They confirmed it's possible. Trauma can erase memories. Her inability to remember isn't suspicious, it's survival. But she acknowledges the footage. Maybe she drove there. Maybe she wanted to see Daniel. She can't say for certain. The memories simply aren't there. The prosecutor stands for cross-examination. This is the moment everyone's been waiting for. The questioning starts gently, almost conversational. The prosecutor asks about the essay, How to Murder Your Husband. Nancy smiles slightly, says it was satire, dark humor. Crime writers do this. She never expected anyone to take it seriously. The prosecutor reads excerpts aloud, the part about financial motives, the section on guns being effective, the discussion of alibis. Does Nancy still think it's funny? Her smile fades. She says context matters. It was entertainment, not a manual. The prosecutor moves to financial records, the debt, the credit cards, the spending. Nancy admits they struggled, but insists they had a plan: downsizing, cutting expenses. The prosecutor asks if that plan included Daniel's life insurance. Nancy bristles, says that's insulting. She never thought about the insurance, didn't even know the exact amounts until after his death. The prosecutor produces emails. Nancy contacted insurance agents 6 months before, 3 months before, 1 month before, asked questions, increased coverage.
The dates are documented. Nancy says that's responsible planning, what married couples do. The prosecutor shifts to surveillance footage, the drives past the culinary school in the days before June 2nd. Nancy says she doesn't remember those either. Maybe errands, maybe thinking about writing. The prosecutor presses. 3 separate mornings, same route, same time, driving slowly, not stopping. What errands require that pattern? Nancy can't say. The memories aren't there. The prosecutor pauses, lets silence fill the courtroom, then asks, isn't it convenient that every incriminating detail is erased by amnesia? The ghost gun sale, the morning drives, the exact moments during the murder window. Everything Nancy can't explain is just forgotten. Nancy stays calm, says trauma doesn't follow convenient timelines. The brain protects itself. The prosecutor asks one final question. If Nancy loved Daniel so much, if he was truly her soulmate, why did she ask about insurance payouts 72 hours after his death? Nancy's composure cracks. She needed to handle practicalities, bills, mortgage. She was alone. The prosecutor asks if she cried when requesting that letter from police. Nancy doesn't answer immediately, then says she doesn't remember. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. Another convenient memory gap. The prosecution plays the essay one more time, Nancy's own words about murder, about motives, about getting away with it. Then the surveillance footage, her van, the timestamps, the route. Then the financial records, the debt, the insurance. Then her shopping history, the engagement rings, the future she was planning. Nancy sits silently. Her testimony is over. She's explained everything she could, denied what she had to, forgotten what was inconvenient. But there's one thing she can't explain away: the cameras. Closing arguments begin 2 days later. The prosecution reminds the jury of one simple fact. Daniel left home at 7 a.m. Someone entered that building, shot him in the back, walked up to him as he lay paralyzed, shot him again. That person left no witnesses, took the weapon, disappeared. But cameras recorded everything. The prosecutor walks through the footage frame by frame. Nancy's van leaving at 6:30, moving toward the school, arriving during the murder window, leaving shortly after. She claimed amnesia, couldn't remember, but the cameras remembered. The prosecutor addresses the ghost gun, purchased 9 months before, claimed it was research for a novel that never existed, then sold to a stranger at a show with no records. The weapon that killed Daniel was a Glock, the same type Nancy bought. Coincidence or planning? Then motive. $60,000 in debt, spending double their income, drowning financially. But Daniel had $1.4 million in life insurance, plus a $300,000 home. Nancy increased his coverage, asked detailed questions about payouts, made sure everything went to her. 3 days after her husband was murdered, she was focused on money. The prosecutor ends simply. Nancy Brophy had motive, she had means, she had opportunity, she had knowledge, and she had a plan. The evidence proves it. Nancy Brophy murdered her husband. The defense argues back. No murder weapon, no fingerprints, no DNA, no eyewitnesses. Everything is circumstantial. Surveillance showing her nearby, not inside, not holding a gun, just nearby. Stories aren't proof, they're narratives constructed from fragments. The defense can't explain who else killed Daniel, but that's not their job. They just have to show the prosecution hasn't proven Nancy did it. If you have doubt, any reasonable doubt, you must acquit. The jury is dismissed to deliberate. Nancy waits. 2 days later, they reach a verdict. What happens next will determine if she ever leaves prison.
May 25th, 2022. The jury reaches a verdict. Nancy stands. The foreperson reads the decision. Guilty. Murder in the 2nd degree. Nancy shows no reaction, no tears, no collapse. just a slight nod. Daniel's family weeps in the gallery. 4 years of waiting. Finally, accountability. Defense announces immediate plans to appeal, but sentencing is coming. June 13, 2022, Nancy returns to court. The judge reviews the case, the evidence, the verdict, then addresses Nancy directly. He speaks about premeditation, planning, the calculated nature of the crime. He speaks about Daniel, a beloved teacher, gunned down in his workplace by the person who vowed to love him. Life in prison, possibility of parole after 25 years. She'll be 83 before she can even be considered for release. Nancy stands, handcuffs applied, led from the courtroom. She doesn't look back, doesn't acknowledge Daniel's family, just walks out, silent. But the story doesn't end there, because after the trial, details start emerging, things Nancy didn't know people had noticed. Friends come forward, colleagues share observations. Daniel had expressed concerns to friends weeks before his death, not fears exactly, but unease. He mentioned Nancy's obsession with money, her frustration with his salary, her growing coldness. One friend recalls Daniel saying things felt different, that Nancy seemed distant, calculating. He brushed it off as marital stress. He never imagined his wife was planning to kill him. Investigators reveal something else, something they held back during trial. Nancy's computer had more searches, deleted searches, recovered by forensics. How to get away with murder, spouse life insurance payout timeline, undetectable poisons. She deleted them thinking they were gone, but digital footprints never truly disappear. Nancy's books are pulled from online retailers. Her publisher severs ties. The essay, How to Murder Your Husband, is archived by true crime researchers, studied, analyzed, a chilling artifact of premeditation. From prison, Nancy maintains her innocence, files appeals, claims the evidence was circumstantial, that the jury was prejudiced by the essay, that her amnesia was real. Legal experts say the appeals won't succeed. The evidence is too strong, the pattern too clear. She'll likely die in prison. Daniel's students create a memorial at the Culinary Institute, a plaque in his honor, photos of him teaching. They remember him as generous, patient, someone who genuinely cared. Nancy wrote about him differently in court statements, called him her soulmate, her great love. But soulmates don't shoot each other in the back, don't stand over their paralyzed spouse and fire again. Whatever Nancy felt for Daniel at the end, it wasn't love. It was something colder, more calculated. There's a question investigators still debate. When did she decide? Was it when she wrote the essay in 2011? Was she testing the idea, speaking it out loud to see how it felt? Or was it later, when the debt mounted, when Daniel's salary wasn't enough, when she realized insurance money could solve everything? Psychologists who study spousal murder note a pattern. It's rarely spontaneous. It's planned, deliberate. The killer convinces themselves they have no choice, that they're trapped, that the victim is the obstacle. Nancy looked at Daniel and saw a problem, not a person, a problem. And she'd written about how to solve problems like that. But here's what makes this case different from most spousal murders. Nancy documented her own planning. The essay wasn't just dark humor, it was recognition, market research for murder. She wrote about motives to see which applied to her. Financial stress, check. Midlife crisis, check. She wrote about methods to evaluate which was most practical. Guns, loud but effective. She wrote about alibis to understand what police would look for. Don't be home, create distance. Then she followed her own instructions. Ghost gun purchase? Untraceable, just like she recommended. Morning of the murder? She wasn't home. She was running errands with convenient amnesia. Distance from the crime? Surveillance showed her leaving quickly, no lingering. She'd written the blueprint, then executed it, almost perfectly. What she didn't account for was one thing. Modern surveillance is everywhere. Nancy believed she'd thought of everything. The ghost gun couldn't be traced, the amnesia couldn't be disproven, the surveillance showed proximity, not guilt. She understood police procedure, evidence collection, reasonable doubt. She'd researched for years, written about it, studied it. But she made one critical mistake. She underestimated investigators who wouldn't accept convenient explanations, who would piece together months of digital breadcrumbs, who would see the pattern. And she underestimated how much the city records. Every camera, every toll booth, every traffic light, every ATM. All of it captured her movements, built a timeline she couldn't explain away. There's something particularly chilling about intimate betrayal. Nancy lived with Daniel for decades, shared meals, shared a bed, looked into his eyes, heard him laugh, and planned his death. She researched ghost guns while sitting beside him. She drove past his workplace, timing routes while he prepared lessons. She increased his insurance while kissing him goodbye. The compartmentalization required for this is profound. Nancy the loving wife, Nancy the grieving widow, Nancy the killer. All three existed simultaneously, none entirely real. Behavioral analysts point to her actions after the murder, the letter request, the insurance focus, the composed demeanor. These aren't the actions of someone in shock, processing grief. They're the actions of someone executing a plan, moving to the next phase. She'd written about this too in her essay. As a romantic suspense writer, I spend a lot of time thinking about murder. She wasn't wrong. The question is, when did thinking become planning? That's the line Nancy crossed. Somewhere between writing about murder and purchasing a ghost gun, she made a choice, a conscious decision that Daniel's life was worth less than her financial freedom. She wrote the essay, she bought the gun, she made the drives, she pulled the trigger. Twice. Daniel was 53 when he died, preparing ice buckets for a cooking class, doing what he loved. He never saw it coming, never knew his wife had entered the building, never felt the first bullet until it tore through his back. The second shot came while he was down, helpless, looking up at the person he'd built a life with. That's what Nancy will live with, whether she admits it or not. She wanted freedom, financial security, a fresh start. Instead, she'll spend decades behind bars, her books forgotten, her name synonymous with betrayal. Daniel is remembered as a teacher, a man who loved food and people. Nancy will be remembered for one thing, the essay she wrote and the murder that followed. Nancy's case reveals something disturbing about premeditated spousal murder. It's never a single decision, it's a series of small choices, each one easier than the last. Chris Coleman made those same choices. Ministry bodyguard, trusted by thousands. He chose an affair over his family, then chose murder over divorce. And when police found his text messages, they realized he'd been planning it exactly the same way Nancy did,